We've reached the third part of our series, and look, it's probably time we fessed up. This whole show, it's really just been about one graph. This one. Hello, old friend. We've seen it over and over and over again. We talked about this line and this line last time, the major parties' falling support. Now, let's spend some time on this line, the line for everyone else.
The rise of the grassroots is Australians speaking up.
The Teals, far from being a genuine community independent movement, are a Green left con job.
The major parties are trying to fend off challenges that have upended political norms and opened up a debate over what exactly a political party even is.
That is beautiful.
This is about more than just who is the member for Wentworth or Indi or Griffith. This is about how Australia's government works.
If the crossbench is bigger, and I'll make that prediction, I think the crossbench is going to be bigger after this election, coordination is going to get a lot trickier.
We could have a country that is effectively stalled.
It's unsurprising that the major parties are saying it will be chaos if there's a minority government, because it's an existential threat to the way they operate.
We've been here before, and not that long ago.
That was a chaotic period.
You can feel the love, can't you?
The world hasn't collapsed. Things have gone ahead.
And it could well happen again.
I'm ready for it. In fact, I'm thinking that's probably likely.
Majority government is a good thing.
I think voters care less about the scenario of minority government than the media does.
100% I would do it very, very differently.
I like to see independence being very, very independent.
I'm Casey Briggs, and this week we're asking, would a minority government be such a bad thing?
We right to go?
That's this week on Swingers.
Are you ready to keep Brisbane green and keep Dutton out? Keep Dutton out! Keep Dutton out!
The Greens are feeling good. This rally is smack bang in the green heart of Griffith. It was once Labor heartland. In fact, it's Kevin Rudd's old seat.
Oh, fair shake of the sauce bottle, mate.
It's one of the 3 inner Brisbane seats the party won from the major parties last election.
In a historic result, Queensland will be sending 3 Greens MPs to Canberra.
A Liberal falls, a Green makes the replacement.
How are you feeling about heading to Canberra?
I think having to do all these interviews and talk to you guys, it's becoming real.
It took many by surprise.
Well, you know, people can underestimate me all they want. It didn't work out well for them 3 years ago. So I would encourage people not to underestimate us this time around.
The Greens will never support Peter Dutton becoming Prime Minister in the coming minority government. We will keep Peter Dutton out.
Pep rallies like this, they're about energising the party faithful, those committed enough to come out in the rain for a long, hard, fast sprint to election day. You picked a lovely day for a rally.
I know. There's been a fair bit of rain up here in Brisbane recently. I think your poor camera operator has now just got soaked as well. I'm excited about what I think is a once-in-a-generation chance to get some real action.
The Greens are hoping they'll land in a powerful position come May 4th, wielding power in a minority government.
Maybe we won't all get everything that we want, but if everyone gives a bit, we can get some really good things done.
It would be the same position they were in 2010. Last time we had a minority government in 2010, were you a literal child at that point?
Was I a literal child? How old have I been in 2010? Senior year in high school, actually, year 12. But, you know, even then I was aware that was a monumental occasion.
So we bloody well got to do it again.
This race is a test for Labor. Having lost the seat to a minor party, can they win it back?
Good morning, I'm Renee, I'm running for Griffith.
Oh, nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. Have a great day.
Seats like Griffith are making the task of forming majority government harder.
Hi, I'm Renee, I'm running for Griffith. It's been 7 days a week for the last few months. So every morning we're either at a ferry terminal or at a bus stop, a train station, talking to people on the way to work. And then the door knocking kicks off. That goes all the way through. I get a little break for a sandwich and then it's straight back through to the evening. I think I'm pretty much going to be knocking on doors until someone says, Renee, stop, the election's over, don't knock any more doors.
Labor sees an opportunity, in part because it managed to win back a state seat within Griffith from the Greens late last year.
The cost of living here is the number one issue. I've knocked on 12,000 doors so far myself this campaign, and cost of living comes up, and they're really worried about the risk of having a Dutton government, what that will mean in terms of cuts.
But Peter Dutton isn't her main opponent here. The Greens are. How you going? This city exemplifies the many, many axes this election will be fought on. Just over there, it's Labor trying to win a seat back from the Greens. But across the river to the other side, and it's the Liberal Party trying to win back a seat from the Greens. In other cities, the Liberals are trying to regain seats lost to independents. And the Nationals, they're defending their territory as well to more independents in the bush.
Knock, knock. I'm Caz. Hello. I'm running as an independent in the upcoming federal election.
This is the seat of Cowper, another new battleground in modern politics.
This is a really nice little street, actually. We're just really interested in finding out what matters to people.
Except for one term in the 1960s, Cowper has been held by the National Party and its predecessors for over 100 years. Caz Heise wants to break that streak.
I've lived and worked in this region for over 20 years. Very passionate about the communities in Cowper. Really fed up with seeing that we're going backwards. You vote the same, you get the same.
When she ran 3 years ago, Caz Heise came very close to winning this seat. When preferences were counted, she fell just a few thousand votes short.
People were really prepared to vote in a way to say they're fed up with politics as usual and they want to see grassroots democracy back.
The current Nationals MP Pat Conahan didn't want to speak to us. Luke Hartsuyker held the seat before him from 2001 to 2019.
Look, the Nationals take every seat very, very seriously and have had a long history of not taking seats for granted. Having said that, it has been shown in the past that there is a willingness to explore alternatives, and certainly a strong challenge from an independent is certainly one that has to be taken seriously.
Pat Conahan needs to fight off a well-resourced campaign.
We've got about 600 really active volunteers, so we've got a huge in-reach this time into the community.
This seat has been a National Party seat for such a long time, and it's no longer representing the people who live here now.
Things are changing and things are a bit more unstable, and we need to have sort of some direction.
I've lived in Port Macquarie for 8 years and I have never seen one candidate come knock on my door or ask me how I felt about anything, and she is very different.
If she succeeds, Caz Heise will join a growing list of crossbenchers in Australia's Parliament. Whether they hold the balance of power after May 3 is the million-dollar question.
Thank you. See you later. Bye-bye. You too.
It used to be that near every seat in the House of Representatives was filled by someone from one of the major parties. As we know, that's changed. The number of people marking their first preference for a minor party or an independent has grown. From less than 10% in the 60s and 70s, growing to 17% by 1990, which, by the way, what a time.
The Hubble Space Telescope, our window on the universe.
One strong, united Germany.
Excuse me, where's the lobby? Down the hall and to the left. Thanks.
It was also when a key moment in the history of independence in this country occurred.
The first independent in the House of Representatives for 25 years, the man who could hold the balance of power, Ted Mack.
He's often referred to as the father of the independents.
We need more expenditure, so anyone who goes around offering tax cuts is just being irresponsible.
He won the blue ribbon Liberal seat of North Sydney from the then shadow Foreign Minister John Spender.
And I suspect he'll sink like a stone.
And if the name Spender rings a bell, yes, his daughter Allegra later pulled a Ted Mack, defeating a blue ribbon Liberal herself last election. That 1990 election was the first year a government came to office with less than 40% of the lower house vote. The first of many elections to come.
There's been this generation on generation of independent candidate that just turns up regardless, just because they're fed up with the two parties. Kudos to these guys who have been plugging away for years.
That plugging away started to show in the vote. Since 1990 on, that line's been trending up.
6 weeks ago, hardly anyone had ever heard of Pauline Hanson. Now she's the name in just about every radio bulletin, every television newscast and newspaper.
Often, but not always, independents were people who started with the major parties and left. Pauline Hanson was a disendorsed Liberal. Bob Catter in North Queensland and Rob Oakeshott in New South Wales were both originally Nationals. Then came Andrew Wilke in 2010 and Cathy McGowan 3 years later, and the independent vote was on the rise. At the last election, the primary vote for anyone other than the major parties climbed above 30%.
There's a big vote for others. A lot of those independents dotted around the country, and there's so many, we're actually having a difficulty trying to track them down in the computer system.
You had something like an even three-way split between Labor and the Coalition and minor parties and independents. That was unthinkable, really, even 20 years ago.
The biggest crossbench Australia had seen since the formation of the current two-party system.
The people who are voting for these minor parties or often single-issue parties, they're more passionate about their political party than people who are voting for the major parties.
I don't think this is a blip, but I also don't think that 2022 came out of nowhere. It was built on the back of decades of major party decline and independent just slogging away, chipping away at a rock face, and finally they broke through.
What we have achieved here is extraordinary.
Our climate has changed.
How would you describe what you're seeing there in this once Liberal heartland?
Well, it's a teal bath, and I've got a feeling it's going to get worse before it gets worse.
Until recently, independents in the House didn't get that much attention from the major parties. They didn't really have that much power until the tipping point, when they were suddenly an existential threat to established parties, when they started to win swathes of Liberal Party heartland, like here in Wentworth.
This has been more severe than I expected.
I have called the teal exercise in 2022 a green left con job. This was an exercise in seeking to secure votes, in many cases, from people who'd been long-term Liberal voters, while disguising the true nature of the candidates who were being elected and the issues they were going to pursue.
I don't listen to that sort of non-evidence-based critique, so to speak.
The criticism comes from the fact that there is some level of coordination in the campaigns of many of them, especially among the group that became known as the Teal Independents. Their Liberal opponents badge them
a political party. They look and sound and smell like a political party.
When they're all networked and knitted together.
It's not a pseudo-political party, it is a political party.
They're not independents.
I think voters get sick of that argy-bargy between parties. That's not the way we do it. We just get on with doing the job.
This election, Climate 200, who back many independents, has given money to about 36 candidates, hoping it helps get them over the line, just like it did in 2022.
Heaps of money. Money for independent campaigns on scales that we've never seen before. It allowed for a very intense period of campaigning where candidates could leave their jobs or take leave. They could run basically a professional campaign on the level of the two major parties.
To run an effective campaign, you are talking about in excess of probably $1 million if you're serious about winning a campaign, which is a shame.
They claim to be community independents, yet they ran on the same 3 issues in every electorate. This was a centrally, nationally coordinated campaign.
And in seats like Cowper, there's a new group called the Regional Voices Fund.
If you're asking me, do we get into specific policies? No. The Regional Voices Fund doesn't. Of course, we do have a climate mitigation agenda. Any candidate that doesn't have a climate mitigation agenda for their community is letting their community down. End of story. But outside of that, every community is unique and will have a unique stance on what policies they want to support or see pushed.
Does that make you a party Well, no, not in the traditional sense, but it does mean you're a bit party curious.
Do they act like a party? I don't know. They are certainly grouped around a philosophy. I would absolutely 100% agree with that. And if that makes them operate a bit like a party, so be it. But if you look at their voting records, they actually have their own minds. I don't want to use the phrase herding cats, but I think it would be the closest to trying to form a party with a bunch of independents. An interesting exercise, that's for sure.
Once that crossbench gets bigger, and they have to act like a party, even though they won't call themselves a party, but they'll have to act like a party. They'll have to caucus, they'll have to have a leader, they'll have to have some kind of internal agreement on messaging. Once all of those things happen and you start to get the stench of a party, I think voters will be much less interested in what you have to offer.
I think there's a lot of confusion about what it means to be a political party. I have no intention of acting more like a political party when that means towing the party line and prioritising that above the interests of my electorate. Which is not to say I'm not willing to collaborate.
Just to be clear, you're not interested in forming a party?
No.
Okay.
I said I'm really happy to be an independent.
No, I get
Thanks,
that.
David.
Okay.
Polling suggests the vote for not major parties is on track to be as high or higher than last time.
There's a real desire from people to have more voices in Parliament.
I think people are really frustrated with the two-party system.
I'm out to win new seats. I want a majority Labor government.
There can be a majority coalition government, and that's what I'm working every day between now and the next election to achieve.
That's what the major parties always want. But what happens when they don't get it? It doesn't happen often, but it does happen.
Morning all.
Oh, Tony Windsor, farmer, enjoying life, one-time federal politician and one-time state politician.
Andrew Wilke, the independent member for Clark in Hobart.
How many parliaments have you sat in now?
10, 13, 16, 19, 20.
My name's Robert Oakeshott. I live in Port Macquarie. You're here at my local surf club.
Do you get more time for surfing now you're out of Parliament?
A lot more time for surfing, a lot more time for family. It's a great pleasure not having to go to Canberra 70 times a year.
Welcome to the National Tally Room in Canberra for Australia Votes 2010. A night that one way or another is going to make history. We could even see the first hung parliament in 70 years.
Election night, you're standing around with all your campaign team, with the TV screens on.
People were pleased that it looked as though I was going to be re-elected.
Tony Windsor easily re-elected. He's got 62% of the first preference votes.
So it was a pretty jubilant night.
Rob Oakeshott's been easily elected.
Probably 3 or 4 beers in, around 11 o'clock that night, that you start getting phone calls and start having to divert your attention and realise the next morning's going to be pretty busy.
What's clear, no one will have a majority tonight.
No, that's
it's
right.
not even clear which party's got more seats.
I don't know whether the ABC had committed itself to broadcasting until the result was known, but if you do, it's going to be ABC 24 for a long time.
Broadcasting until I slump forward onto the desk. We're not there yet.
And then Sunday drifted into Monday. There were people applying pressure here and there, but there were all these people from the past who just happened to be ringing up to say good day.
I mean, I had no experience in the workings of the Parliament. I assumed back then that I was, going into a room with political giants who had so much expertise and skill and political nous that I had to be very careful that they could run rings around me. Interestingly, I have discovered that there are less political giants in Canberra than I had first thought.
There was no playbook on any of this minority government stuff, so at the time I was actually hoping to go fishing with the kids and maybe go camping for a week at the end of an election campaign. And we did make a decision to then jump on a plane and meet the other crossbenchers in Canberra and put a bit of a group strategy together.
It was clear though to all of us, even me who was brand new, that we had a duty to make the Parliament work.
Alongside Andrew Wilke, there was the newly elected Greens MP Adam Bandt, a Western Australian Nationals MP who wasn't part of the coalition, and the 3 Bush independents, Rob Oakeshott, Tony Windsor and Bob Catter.
Hey! Hey, well done. Congratulations.
Fantastic result.
A trio who coordinated their negotiations with the parties and let the ABC's Four Corners program film their deliberations. Some of the media started calling them the 3 amigos.
It was an act of convenience in a sense that the three of us appeared at a lot of press conferences together and whatever else, and that's where I think the three amigos came from.
The initial plan was to get the crossbenchers together and get us on a bit of a unity ticket without working as a party, but just making sure that we weren't picked off by the major parties and played off against each other. We need to bust a move. Where's Tony? We're split. The first conversation I had with Tony Abbott at the time was, happy to talk about any legislation at all, but just nothing about climate change, nothing about the NBN. Now, they were the two key issues that I'd campaigned on in the local area and been elected on legitimately. So we immediately ran into a roadblock with each other, and I think, it was very difficult to recover from there.
Well, I think Tony just assumed that the country members of Parliament, they'll have to come our way. He just assumed that. And I think in the last week, he suddenly realised that no, it doesn't work that way. So out came this gush of money and promises and phone calls. He rang me at one stage, I'll do anything to get the job. It sort of said to me that this bloke is not serious about the work, he just wants to get his hands on power. It's an important job to run the country.
The pressure on the independents to come up with a decision is intensifying.
The Labor Party, offered a ministry which I ended up knocking back. I felt I had to work 100% within the local community to try and maximise the opportunity for, the 100,000 people who'd voted for me.
The Greens had been thrashing out their own deal, signing an agreement with Julia Gillard.
Congratulations, thank you.
Andrew Wilke did a deal too, in which Labor committed to change poker machine laws. With those two deals locked away, it all came down to the three amigos. And 17 days after the election, they gathered to share with each other which way they would go before heading to a joint press conference to tell the world.
And we're going through the process of deciding, who you're voting for, Bob, who you're voting for, Rob, and whatever. And Bob went first and said that he was going to support Abbott, and that was fine. Oakeshott
stability and outcomes from
made it clear what he was going to do, and I was with him. And then Bob started floating around my office, waving his arms and saying, well, it's all going to be all about you. It's going to be all about you. That upset the process in a sense because he went straight down to his office and called a press conference in his office.
I'm sorry, I wish they'd have held it somewhere else. Obviously I'm here and my two colleagues are not here. I will be backing the coalition, yes.
I think handling that last day was a complete mess with Bob Catter running off doing his own thing.
And so it all came down to the two amigos.
I intend, with my vote, for what it's worth, to support the Labor Party.
I'll do what I have always done, ironically, and give confidence and supply to government. And in effect, that means confidence and supply in Julia Gillard.
The 43rd Parliament was off and running. How did it go? Well, it depends who you ask.
We had a front row seat to the machinations of the Oakeshott, Windsor, Greens, Labor alliance back in 2010, and it was not a pretty sight.
These were unstable times, and in such times of instability, good government comes a long way second to simply getting through the day and the week.
It was stable, and no one can deny that it was productive.
By some measures, Julia Gillard got legislation through Parliament at the highest rate of all our PMs. A lot of bills were passed, but many commitments the crossbenchers had negotiated weren't among them. Was the deal worth it?
Well, we achieved a lot. Dental into Medicare for kids, $13 billion for clean and renewable energy, seeing Australia's climate pollution come down. Did we get everything we wanted? No. I don't think anyone did in that Parliament, but it achieved some real change.
So halfway through my first term, the formal agreement between Julia Gillard and myself is effectively torn up when the government says it will not deliver on its promise for poker machine reform. Looking forward to future parliaments, I have learned not to do a formal deal at all.
Was it all worth it?
Well, was it all worth it is a really good question. NBN has been butchered and made a bit of a mess of, and then the carbon pricing got torn up as well. But yeah, you certainly reflect on whether it was all worth it or not. I think it was. I hope it was. And hopefully it's planted some seeds for future parliaments to think about what matters, and if a minority government certainly comes up again.
This is all getting at a fundamental divide. Two schools of thought about how our politics and parliament should operate. There's the camp that thinks the best thing for the country is majority government, where one side of politics runs the show. And if us voters don't like what they've done, we can kick them out.
I've always felt that strong governments provide strong leadership and deliver better policy outcomes than governments that are actually hamstrung by needing to negotiate with a very broad crossbench.
For example, the Howard government had a strong majority when it announced its plans to introduce a goods and services tax. It suffered a significant swing against it in the 1998 election.
They don't like the idea that the lower house can kick them out before an election in a vote of no confidence.
In times where the party in government doesn't have a majority and is fighting for its survival just about every day, long-term reform goes out the window.
Well, history says that's nonsense. Where's the reform been coming from majority governments? Show me the evidence.
The other camp broadly thinks having more voices in Parliament helps make better policy.
We haven't seen either party willing to show some guts on the big issues, and I think the only way we're going to see those bold decisions is with a balanced government where there are a bunch of crossbenchers in there who are not thinking about their future ministerial careers or winning government. They're just thinking about making the laws better.
Ultimately, voters will deliver a parliament, and the people in it will have to make it work.
There's often a tendency to say, well, we've got a new reality here and that's baked in, but politics is a dynamic and ever-changing game.
We're talking potentially double-digit numbers on a crossbench, and I think how the crossbench internally manages that, I think something that they need to give a lot of consideration to.
Does that mean chaos? No, not necessarily. It can mean chaos, but it can also mean a functional government, and we have to accept what the voters are demanding.
Today's crossbenchers clearly learned lessons from last time. Most now say they wouldn't do any formal deals to back a government.
When I tore up, or Julia Gillard effectively tore up the agreement between us, and I then became a loose cannon, I discovered I had more influence in Canberra.
I think the preference for a crossbench would be to keep it fluid. I think that's one of the lessons learnt.
A minority government can be formed without having pieces of paper to take to the Governor-General.
Some people wonder if a minor party could eventually become so big it essentially becomes a legitimate third major party. Others say that's impossible.
I worship at the Church of Australian political stability. I don't think anything is going to become particularly volatile. The system is not set up for a third party. The kind of electoral system that Australia has over time produces two major parties. Parties come, parties go. We thought the Democrats were going to be the third force. The Greens are kind of the third force. But over the very long run, we have two parties.
If you look at the history of the minor parties in Australia, what you find is that they actually struggle. The closer they get the government, the shorter their life cycle. And the reason for that is governing is really, really hard.
What the independents do to that two-party system, that really remains to be seen. My guess is that they get subsumed into one of the major parties, probably the Liberal Party, but who knows? We have to keep watching. Maybe something exciting will happen in Australian politics.
And so it was the three amigos in 2010. Are you hoping that maybe in 2025 we might have the 15 amigos?
There'll be more amigos. No, probably there'll be better amigos than me anyway.
Next time, leaders are crisscrossing the country, holding babies, wearing high-vis, doing whatever this is. Why exactly? What exactly is the circus of an election campaign for? And in the end, does a campaign even make a difference? That's next time on the final part of swingers.